it's not that platform is not for everybody, so it's fine. It's just yeah. I wonder why it does that. Why does it mute me altogether when I disappear like that? So
It's called muting the visual, not muting the microphone.
It's wild news.
Ouens is wakker is al verby jou slaaptyd al.
Ek is nog wakker.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, muting the visual. That's what we'll do from time to time. I'll juggle with the visuals here a little bit.
Okay, can I talk us through just what we want to do in the 15-minute video shortly? When we think of mild musings, wild musings will work as well, but Theo and Owen and I had a discussion a while back where I started playing with this idea of short story blocks in which you provide an attention directing framework within which to think through an issue. And those directing frameworks have to do with just key words and a question or two tied to each of them. Not too many, maybe just one per key word. To throw out a topic and say, okay, here's how I would encourage you to, it's a way to think of it. There's no one way to go at an issue, right? The way is dependent upon your audience, right? Your way is also of addressing an issue is dependent on, I think, the intensity of the issue. There are times you want to keep the temperature down, assuming that the other two on the other side want to fight with you. But if not, then so there are different ways to go at an issue. It's probably as multiplex or variegated as can be, right? And so the issue I want to put on the table is, how do we help believers think through an issue like, the gender issue, the transgender issue, right? So in there goes bisexual, homosexual, lesbianism. If you want to throw a heterosexual in here, that's fine. But I think it's more sort of what's opposite of heterosexual. Okay. So here's a way I would suggest going at it. I said you need to think of a few things, and I want to give you 3 things that you need to keep in the backdrop of your mind, right? In the background of your mind, and up against that, raise the hard questions. So here are the 3 words. We want to look at the issue of transgenderism and ask the question, or raise the issue of, where are we at socially? As a society, where are we at? Now already, in terms of how I phrase the question, that is predicated upon where you are. If I'm in a communist country, I'm going to be a lot more careful how I word things and how I phrase things, because every call is monitored by Big Brother, right? In our situation, we have freedom of speech, so we can say things like, what is the social dynamic or the social framework that exists in our culture? And then the second word I want to raise is, where is our culture at from a moral standpoint? So first, where are we postured sociologically, societally? And second, where are we postured morally? And then the third one is, what would be the civil way to address the issue, a civil way of addressing it. Now, at no point have I mentioned the scriptures, and yet the scriptures, in my understanding, backs each of those entities as a question, right? So when I go back to the first word, social, what are the social dynamics in our own country? Well, the three questions that come up is, are we a theonomous culture? Number one. Number two, are we a heteronymous culture? Okay, so watch the words are a bit big, and I'll go back each time. I'll come back over the words, and I'll come back over the questions, so that as the person, I'm talking to the person, I'm getting them to think with me. And I've done this before because somebody asked me on the spot, meneer, wat sê jy? Ek wil hoor wat jy sê. Ek wil nie hoor wat ander mense sê nie, hoor wat jy sê. And this is the way I went at it. So under society, where is society postured? Is society autonomous? Is it theonomous or heteronymous? Now I'll come back and I'll unpack the words further. Then I go on to the moral issue. Where are we? What do we consider our morality to be? What do we consider sacred in this culture? Right? And I would suggest two things, because you want to work with a manageable number of things. I would say two things. Number one, sexuality is sacred. And number two, ethnicity is sacred. Right? So I'll come back and I'll unpack those two words as well. And then we go into the third word, civility. How do we handle transgenderism from a civil or civility standpoint? We do what's good and will help people. Right? So now let's go back to the social dimension. First question, are we an autonomous culture? In other words, everyone does what is right in their own eyes. Or are we a heteronymous culture? Do we do what the elites tell us to do, such as in Animal Farm, right? 4 legs good, 2 legs good, 4 legs bad, right? Or four legs bad and 2 legs good. And I'll play around with that. I'll mess around with that image and say things like all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others, coming out of George Orwell's work of 1984, right? So in a heteronymous culture, an elite group makes decisions, right? In a theonomous culture, God makes the final decision because every area is governed by what God says. And we are a theonomous culture because He executes His direct rule over our lives. And so Islam, for instance, would be a theonomous culture, right? A heteronymous culture would be communism. And an autonomous culture, well, is a culture where everyone just blooming well does what they want. They do what is right in their own eyes, right? And then we go on to the second word. From a morality standpoint, what does this culture consider sacred? Well, two things are sacred, because the one thing I can't change is my ethnicity. We grew up as Cape Colored fellows, right? There's no way I can change that, even if I tried, even if I don't adopt the label. My ethnicity cannot change. Second thing that is sacred is sexuality. Something that I can't change. It's sacred. And what is sacred is what orients me to my world, right? And then the third word is civility, being civil. And I want to suggest that everything we do, everything we say needs to be permeated by the supreme ethic, which we call love, right? It's the final apologetic. And love at times will mean taking a very tough line, a very hard line. At other times, it would mean I can accommodate, what I'm wrestling with. Okay, so those are the three, and then I'll inject the issue. Now let's put the transgender issue inside of this framework. And let's decide socially how we go at it from our own cultural standpoint. Right? We are a democratic society, and we start messing around with all of what that means. Right? Okay, so I'm just going to give the three words. It is social, moral, and civil. Right? And then each one has obviously the two questions. The first one has got three comments. Are we an autonomous culture? Typewriter's not working so well today. Autonomous, theonomous, and heteronymous. One could think of simpler words. Heteronymous. Okay, and then under each one I would unpack it. And I just unpack it in terms of what's manageable. There could be 3 or 4 things you could go at here. So under autonomous, self-rule. I'm a law unto myself. And theonomous, God rule, right? And I use the example, Islam will be a theonomous culture. Heteronymous, use one example, communism. Okay. And so that gives you some. The reason I like to do it this way is, and each issue will have different pieces in there, right? But they give you pegs to hang your thoughts on. They're providing some pegs for someone else to hang their thoughts on. Okay. What Owen and I wrestled with yesterday was, I said to Owen, the way you phrase your question is built on certain assumptions that you make. We presume certain things and we assume certain things. Presumptions are what you take in before you actually start. Assumptions are based on basically what you're just assuming to be true or real. And on each point you may be dead wrong, right? So that's why we need to even allow our questions to be questioned. Okay. So while we don't deny all of that, all of us bring in our culture and assumptions, we try to do our best to leave those assumptions at the door and to come in and to work with what is. Now, if you say, okay, this doesn't make sense to me, then I will take the other way to do it. Can we just give a second way very quickly? Is to work with what I call 3 axioms. Okay. Okay. So what's an axiom?
Could I just
Yeah.
ask something before
Sure.
you go to
Yep.
that?
Yep.
This alternative set that you are thinking through now or anticipating to give, is that reflective of what you consider would be presented just as an alternative way of thinking, or is this something that you think is presented normally in
Okay. I would suggest that this is a more conceptual framework, right?
okay.
The other way to go at it is purely to use a story and use a story out of a headline. This morning's news. Female, transgender males will be participating in on mixed teams in rugby or on all girls teams in soccer, right? So there you're using an existent story, and then you can use the same framework as a way of analyzing the thing.
Right.
It's a way. I will never want to say this is the way, because you know what we're going to do? We're going to memorize this, and we're going to foist it onto every issue,
Yeah. So, okay, I get it.
irrespective of the cultural background. And I, for one, I'm trying to steer away from that. Right? So today I'll do it this way, because the way I read this guy I'm talking to is I'm reading a couple of things and I'm making assumptions. Okay? Let me give you a totally different way of going. So there's a story way. You use this morning's headline. Sexuality scripted lessons are now part of the curriculum in pre-primary school and primary school. And it's been signed into legislation. And here's the paperclip or the newspaper clip. And there you've got your story already. How you work your story. Okay. So this is a conceptual framework you can bring to a story. Okay. The other way to do it is if you don't have a story. Now this again becomes a lot more intensely conceptual, is to work with axioms. Now what is an axiom? An axiom is a self-evident truth. Now the word axiom is a biblical word. It appears in Ephesians 4 verse 1. Walk worthy. That word axios is the word for worthy. Axios, can you hear the word axiomatic right in there? Right? So axios, bring your life in balance. Based upon chapter 1, 2, and 3, these are things that you are. They are perfections and positions and possessions that you have as a believer. Now walk in harmony with that. Bring the scale into balance. Bring the scale up. Okay. I'm trying to gesticulate, but I guess the screen is a bit too small. My screen shows it.
Yeah.
You're bringing the scale. So the word axios has to do with a self-evident truth that you cannot question any further. There's no question lying at the back of that question. Right? It's as far back as you can go. So when you talk about axioms, you talk about self-evident truths that you can't go further than that. Okay? And as believers, in my mind, there are only 3 things that you can't go further back than. Number 1, God exists. Number 2, God has spoken. Number 3, God has spoken truthfully. Right? So God, the Bible, and truth. I can't go further back than that. If you can kick one of those pillars away, you're going to lose a very crucial piece as a basis from which to think. Okay? I'm talking again for the Christian. Right? Now, of course, you're going to start in a different place when you're working with a pagan. Right? So there are other ways of going at it. So with the 3 axioms, God has spoken. Right? I like to say it this way: He is there, and He is not silent. To use Francis Schaeffer's terminology, God has spoken. In the Bible, and spoken truthfully. Now, the truthful element is a very crucial one because of where we're sitting today. We're sitting in a situation where people are saying there's no such thing as truth. We're autonomous beings. We determine what truth is. Okay? So these 3 axioms I will bury in one sentence. And I would say, God is there and He has spoken in the scriptures truthfully. So I capture all 3 axioms in one shot. Okay. Now again, if you're working with an atheist, An atheist doesn't work from the premise that God exists, still less that God has spoken, because he doesn't exist. Or an agnostic who says, I just don't know. So I'm not going to make a comment either way. Right? So then, of course, jou vertrekpunte gaan heeltemal verskillend wees. And then God has spoken in the scriptures and he's spoken in creation. With an atheist, I could try poking at the fact that creation speaks about a transcendent being, somebody bigger than I. Okay? And then he has spoken truthfully. What is truth? Truth is that which corresponds to reality as it is. Right? It's not just truth claims, but to be living the truth, to be truthing has to do with living in fidelity with the flow of reality. Okay? So there you've got it. That's another way of doing it. But I want to work with the first one, the social, the moral, and the civil. Okay? At another time we can work with how would you go at an atheist with this sort of thing?
Can I?
Where would you start? Right? And I normally say you start where he starts or she starts. But you have to think it through, right? Because you're not going to start at the same points necessarily. Maybe with an atheist you could start at a point like this. Okay. Do you believe that there are things that are wrong? Here's another interesting place to start. And often you get the guy says, well, eventually, yes, there are things that are wrong. So can we make the assumption then that where there is wrong, there is right? The opposite of wrong is right. If wrong exists, then there's a second reality that exists. Right must exist. Right? Second one is as real. Okay, so you have wrong, and then you've got RIGHT, right? And then I would say, okay, if there's right and wrong, and if there is beautiful, you know where this one goes, right? Beautiful, the opposite of beautiful, ugly.
No.
And of course, there you can get into quite a discussion because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? I said hearing is also in the eye of the beholder. Not only beauty, but listening and hearing things is also in the eye of the beholder. It's who's listening. Okay. Then I'm taking it progressively. Right, wrong, beauty, ugly. Okay, and you can use some fun ones really that gets a dialogue going. That's all I'm trying to do. You see.
Yes.
The third one would be we said right, wrong, beauty, ugly. I would actually maybe do this the other way. Start with beauty, ugly, then go to right and wrong. Because if you go to right and wrong, it sets you up for the next one. There must be a standard for right.
Oh, okay. So you
and
have
wrong.
Got it.
So you've got a progression here. It's running. Okay? Because now if you do the way I've done it, then you're going to have to bounce back to right and wrong in order to get to a standard for right and wrong. Right? So it says, yes, I agree. There must be a standard. Of course, an atheist would say the culture determines what's right and what's wrong. So the majority view goes. It's called sociological law, right? I mean, each of these points, guys, opens up a whole dialogue. I mean, a dialogue every word that I throw in here.
Sure.
But that's the point. The point is you're getting the discussion going. You see, we get so nervous, we inject the cross right at the first step. And the person says, no, You haven't put that thing into a context, right?
Mm.
Okay. Now, when you get over the standard for right and wrong, you're going to have to go to the next, ask the next question. Okay. Who or what is that standard? And again, opens a whole realm of why does it have to be personal? Why can't it just be impersonal, right? So there are a whole lot of different ways you can state these things: right, wrong, beauty, ugly, right, wrong, a standard for beauty, a standard for ugly, a standard for right, a standard for wrong. But you almost get driven to a logical conclusion on each of these, that if there's a law for right and wrong that determines right and wrong or depicts right and wrong, then there must be a lawmaker, right? That's where the next one comes in. Who or what is the standard? Well, let's throw around that idea of lawmaker. Okay. Now, I'm overstating this for simplicity's sake. I mean, as I said, you get a guy going off and saying, no, I don't go for a personal lawmaker. I'll go for an impersonal lawmaker, right? That opens very interesting avenues for discussion. So you can see now where it becomes easier to make a jump. If you assume a lawmaker and a personal lawmaker, then what's your beef with the scriptures? Can we go there? Can I show you from the scriptures? He says, no, I don't want to have the scriptures come into this thing. Then you have to be very creative with how you go at it. Okay, but there are a number of ways out around it. But a way I've already asked the questions does aim the thing in a particular direction. You don't ask a question just to go nowhere. You ask a question because you're trying to set a trajectory, right? The other way to do it is purely to start where the person is. And that takes a lot more, you have to think on your feet, right? I think the baby way to start is what I'm giving here, right? Give some pegs, some hooks that Christians can use to get the thinking process going. Eventually, you'll become adept at it, and you can go with the flow. The Okie can fire a question, like I fired the question, Owen, to our friend yesterday. Yeah, I said, now, Marlon, where are you at on your journey? Right now, of course, it was a non-threatening way to do it, because now this is a journey. Now, I could have said, now, Marlon, where are you at in relation to Jesus and what he has done for you? Which, depending on the way the discussion was going, could have still been a very legitimate question, but I asked it quite differently. Where you're at in your journey, because it is quite interesting when God encounters people. He is always encountering them in a process of migrating from one place to another. Okay, so I'm just trying to give you more the thinking at the back of the thinking here. It's not just Hebrews coming out of Egypt. If I encounter you en route to work, I'm encountering you in a migratory pose. Right? You're going from home to work. And God is always encountering people on a journey of migration. Can you see how easy it makes it for us to talk to immigrants? Because the migratory idea is right in there. I was looking at Jeremiah 2 last night, and Jeremiah 2 and 3 talks right into this thing about we are watching for the ancient paths, the old ways. I mean, that's biblical terminology. The ancient path. What's the ancient path? What is the path that God walked with his people? Where's that path? Well, it's a path. I can't show you the path, but it is a path. And God directed them. How? Supernaturally. Right? It's a pillar of fire and a cloud. pillar of fire at night, a cloud by day. Okay? So to view Christianity as a way is not ancient to the thinking of the ancient past. Because he didn't lead them via a map. He led them supernaturally, didn't he? Okay, I'm going off a bit, but you get the drift. So I would always want to start somebody who's not even, who doesn't have any apologetic skills. And this is where I will start, in the baby stage. And that's why the Ephesians 4 edification model, the 1 Corinthians 11 to 14 edification model has this kind of thinking buried in it. Remember, I think I spoke to both of you guys about the concept of free speech.
Yeah.
I think we did
Yeah,
go there, right? The modality of these key passages that I've highlighted has got free speech in there. Yes, in a Bible study, and you don't come to sit soak and sour here. And it's not a one-way discussion. It's a mesh topology network. The place you find yourself in requires interaction. What you are thinking is crucial around the text, about the text, as you engage with the text. Okay, so anyway, that's a free speech comment. So I say, free speech comment.
You have
I would say,
remain silent, I was going to say, but
yeah.
but can I just
Right. Yes.
can I quickly switch to something here, Terry?
Yeah.
Can you see this? What do you see? Let me see what you see.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Oh, okay. So you don't see no nothing yet, but can you see this?
Okay, I can see that. Oh yeah, I can see it.
Now,
Quite small, but if I go large, yeah, it's a little bigger.
So I mean, so for instance, if you could just imagine that you were in control of this. Well, let me just do this. Let me just take you away and take Owen away and do this and switch this around. Is this better? I can't hear you now.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
And I can hear you.
Okay.
I move from left to right in any case, so it's actually just a natural movement, unless I'm Jewish. Go right to left.
But I can write on this in the live. I'm just scribbling here.
Okay, and a person can follow on the screen what I'm writing.
Right. I can also sort of highlight like this. Now, what I'm using here, Terry, is remarkable. Remarkable.
As in the app.
Yeah.
Or the package. Yeah.
The pad, right? So this is something we can explore to answer the question earlier about how you would be visually carrying us along an understanding of, in this particular case, how to think about thinking.
So I can possibly, I would see a limitation. If I've got 10 guys on a screen then I would have a different problem here, right?
Why would that be a problem?
Because when I flash up this thing, I lose them visually, but they can see the screen.
Yes, that's all that happens. You lose them
visually. That's all that happens. And when I kill this, the 10 will be back on screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's something to think about.
Okay. Yeah. Dink en drink gaan saam. Sorry, Owen.
So.
Je doppie wegzet.
So, I mean, you're very good at calligraphy, Terry. So, I'm deleting certain things here. This is a good solution for that. I think there are other platforms too. I think you can use an iPad and just demonstrate it that way as well. Now it's rather small. One could actually be smart about it and Let me just add another page and see. Yeah, okay. So, okay, you can be smart and keep things very, very simple. Deleting that. And you can say,
I've got an iPad. Well, I don't have an iPad. I've just got a tablet, but it's so old and it'd probably be so slow to
yeah,
hook up to this thing.
yeah.
Um,
But there's solutions for that. Sorry, that's just,
no, but that's helpful. Yeah.
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 Um,
So even though I have 10 on screen, I won't lose them.
no,
They'll
yeah,
just disappear from the screen,
yeah.
but they can see what you're drawing.
And
Yeah.
actually, in your, again, here it is that the moderator, you as the moderator, needs to have a technician that can take you from one space to another, following the purpose of switching.
Right.
Can you just tell me if can you write in the text box? Can you hear me? Because I'm not so sure. I have a little bit of a problem. Owen, can you hear me? Terry, can you hear me? If so, can you please just write something down in the private chat?
It's not right.
So my lips were moving, but could you hear me?
I can hear you. Even when you go out, I can
Oh,
hear
okay.
you.
So you
But
could
I
hear.
can't write in that block. I can
No,
only write in the
definitely you
private
can't.
chat.
That's the
Yeah.
aha. Oh, that's
I can write in the private chat.
yes, that's what I meant.
Okay.
So when I asked if you could write something, I meant in the private chat.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Because I was trying to click on the pen on the
Okay.
tablet, and I'm
No,
thinking,
sorry.
"Wat praat die ou nou?"
Daar is net voor mensen
Okay.
van Constantia. But
Okay.
so okay, all right, okay. But I have to say, I find it fascinating, and what I have seen this model that you are suggesting in action over, all of our lives, so to speak. Owen, I suppose I would say since 2013. It's 10 years now with Wise Up when we started. We had set up these national hubs in different parts of the country. Most of them were in Bloemfontein, but we had a couple in Cape Town. But Bloemfontein seemed to have been the sort of main center. And there was a good example, and I think of how Terry managed to get us thinking about ideas in a non-threatening manner. That would always set up the place, I think, for civility. And I think after the second Wise Up in 2014, we introduced something called unconferencing, where there's no script, none whatsoever. So you have a conference where you don't know what's going to happen. Literally, there is no schedule. There is some kind of framework, but the framework is called there's no framework. And Terry, it would be fair to say that that's probably one of the most valuable examples of how civility can prevail through talking through issues that were sometimes very hard for these principals and teachers to deal with. Now, they were not, strictly speaking, spiritual matters, but they were spiritual for them. They were almost sometimes existential. Um, people felt, how do I deal? A leader would ask, how do I deal with somebody that can't wait to leave the school? As soon as the bell goes off, the teacher rushes off. How do so these managerial deficiencies that these people saw, teach principals especially, in relation to the work that they took quite seriously, was hard for them. None of them we would have ever connected with if we had a church conference on leadership, I would imagine.
That's right. Yeah. 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 You're quite right. And are you aware that even the way we had phrased it, unconferencing, the reality of the script was that there was no script. It's the same concept. The moment you script the Tao, it's not the Tao, right? The moment you live your life as a Christian by rules, you have missed a vital aspect of grace living, right? Of experiencing Christianity as the way. So I would say, Theo, these are deeply spiritual concepts without even using the word spiritual at any point. Owen, see how it comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm no advocate of being antinomian. An untrained ear would say, I sound like I'm antinomian. I'm not antinomian. I just understand that one who walks in the Spirit is one who understands the dynamic of the supernatural life living in a natural world. Because that's what it is, right?
Absolutely.
And so even as ancient as we were in Bloemfontein and Cape Town, we were really talking about the nature of unconferencing is
Conferencing.
yeah,
Interesting.
and no script, which is the script. The Tao is not the Tao, but the Tao is pointing to something. Remember my ancient illustration? If I point to the sun, I say, there's the sun, Owen. Are you going to look at my finger? No, you're going to look at where my finger is pointing.
That's right.
This is the signifier. My finger is the signifier. Just hoe ver oor moet ek gaan? Okay. The signifier, because the screen cuts off. It's actually good to know. Yeah. But you're going to look at what's the signification? The sun. And I would venture to say the reason why we need apologetics is we have not taught our people how to think. So we need the professional apologist to come into the outfit to teach us how to think through these issues. And yet, if we were schooled from day one to think within a modality, a network, a topology, a mesh network, it's amazing how our skills would have been honed to such a height already that you could drop that individual in any context and they will be able to think their way clear. 99.9% of Christians can't do that. You take them out of the environment, they don't even realize that their terminology needs to change.
Yeah. So much to our shame that actually. That's
I think you are constantly hammering that question today, Theo, but nou hoe het ons daar uitgekom? What did we miss and why did we miss it?
I almost don't want to even ask that question anymore because it inflicts such bitterness and such distraction. And I was saying to somebody else last night in a conversation, the question can be viewed as one that, in a way, absconds you from your own contribution to the dilemma. You're asking the question as if you are not a guilty party to it.
Guilty, yeah. But that's why we need to ask it.
So yeah, to cast light on our own guilt.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then to ask for forgiveness and to to start. But you know, I almost think, Terry and Owen, we should also explore the need to deposit this approach to young people, to begin thinking of that next generation. And not when I'm saying younger people, but I am thinking about our own children. So there's
And of course,
certain,
the question coming out of that is we need to start yesterday.
sure.
You have constantly hammered me over the years. Get the stuff out there. Well, here we are, man, and let's get it out there. So, what about giving a 15-minute shot to? I've given you more than I'd anticipated now in the private chat there.
Yeah, I
But
took
I
some
was
notes as well, but I think that's useful. But I think,
You see, I would want to spend as little time talking through social, moral, and civil. I said, okay, can I give you a scaffolding? So it will guide you. I know where this can go. I've been there, I've used it, but you don't know where to go. So I'm trying to work with you in a real life situation of how to go at it. So Johnny, let me tell you, I want you to remember these three words: social, moral, civil. Right? Read after me, recite after me. Because it's baby stages. Okay? You can't. I would only jump the three axioms to somebody who's got a different level of maturity. Because I don't think your new Christian can listen. I know a guy who only knows the Lord 2 years and he's thinking this way. Now I just have to say that to our shame, to my shame. 2 years and he can reason this way according to the three axioms. Now, he doesn't state it the way I do, but he says, I need three things. God needs to be in there, truth must be in there, and the scriptures must be in there. It's the only three things I need as a point of departure. Everything else is derivative. Nou gaan jy 'n slim Jan kry wat gaan sê, what about the deity of Christ? That's a derivative that you pick up as you read the Bible. Right? What about the Trinity? It's a derivative you get as you read the scriptures. What about resurrection? They derive as you read the scriptures. Right? But now just guess, just think of how you and I could have gotten shaped. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm right in there. I'm part of the problem. You weren't necessarily taught to think. You're taught to, number one, memorize, right? Out of context. Okay, to our shame, because few people can put those very same verses they quote in the context of the storyline. 1 John 5:11 and 12 as a title. It's an assurance verse, assurance of salvation. In relation to what and to whom and when and where? Well, I don't know. I just memorized it because it gives me the assurance. So anyone can demo that, right? But when I watch this youngster, the reason purely from that base. This kind of guy you can throw in the heat of the battle and he'd be able to make sense. This is where he's at. Just like it. And that takes training. If you listen to Jordan Hall, if you ever have the courage to listen to Jordan Hall, you will say, what does this babbler say? Jackie's been listening to Jordan Hall and she understands everything that Jordan Hall says. Right, Jackie? Jordan Hall has just come to faith, gentlemen. The man comes out of a background of searching, of groping for God. Well, he is trusted Christ. But you must hear this man talk through, reasoning through the scriptures. Something of a Jordan Peterson, but probably taking it another light year ahead of where Peterson is. So anyway, that's for what it's worth. I still like the way the Lord is able to weave all of our non-successes. And at age 66, still recycle you in a very energetic, effective kind of way. And I can't explain all of that, but he's just able to do it. I'm so glad he's able to do it. I don't, want to take credit for any of that, but all
Yeah.
the blupses come in there because now we know how not to do it. And with the generation coming up, you can't do it the way we done it. You didn't get it, you don't got it, right?
Look, if we didn't do it there, we didn't do it now. But well,
Yeah.
but thank the Lord. Oh, Terry did it, so why can't I did it?
What the kind? Zambia did it, so why can't we did it?
I'll do it again.
So what about I've not done it live like this. I'm just thinking now. What about you guys on the other side of my camera and just say like, listen, we got an issue today. It's a hot one, man. Help us think through. Help us talk through. Help us walk through in a process kind of way. This issue of transgenderism, right?
Yeah, we've not even
Now-
gotten to the issue yet, so it's just
Now we
framed.
have to obviously define our terms and so on and so on. But I think when you go at it this way, you're giving some kind of. You can't give nothing to a new Christian. You can't give nothing. And even with those whose lives into whom we are breaking into their lives now. The train left Cairo years ago. I'm only jumping on the train here in Joburg. So the train has been running and that Christian has been living his life. And now they meet a guy like Owen and it's like, what does this babbler say? Well, this babbler better be very intentional, strategically intentional about how he says things. Because he wants to fire their thinking, right? And that's what I'll throw in there. And I suggested to Theo this afternoon, if you only have 3 minutes to talk through transgenderism, you better know what you're talking about because you only have 3 minutes. And then you have to jump on your train. It's like the 3-minute testimony. You don't have 6 hours to explain your life story, but you got 3 minutes, a minute on each aspect. And you have to have thought it through in order to give it that way, right? So you need to work with something. And then eventually God will get you to break out of that cocoon. I almost want to say into a new cocoon, but that wouldn't be wrong to say either. Because we are moving from one degree of glory to another, and to another. And each time you are having a regeneration experience into the next level. And a regeneration experience into the next level. And I'm not using that salvifically, I'm using it scientifically.
Yeah, if you're beginning to suggest the new name of the church, the First Church of the Cocoons.
So like sy nie die first church of the coons nie. Dan is ons in die soppe.
First Church of the Cocoons. The main
But
cocoon.
can you see why some of our dialogue to the uninitiated ear, hulle gaan onmiddellik afswitch en sê, nee, julle ons het afgewyk.
Yeah.
I think some of them would be ready to burn us at the stake. Right?
No,
Maybe not chop our heads off, but burn us at the stake.
shall I end the stream or?
Yeah, I think at least there's a framework to think on. So you
Yeah.
know, we want to hit it. Maybe it gives you guys time just also to think. Is there a place for questions in the kind of way we're going to do it? But then it won't be sort of like a 3-4 minute thing. You know, it will be a
No.
lot longer. But I can be the backbone of a crazy discussion, Owen.
Yeah, I think-
A wild musing.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, but just be ready. I think we just need to be ready for the questions and the responses. That's all. Because this is still a sensitive issue globally, I think. And how one approaches it, I think you're going to use the right approach. But we can expect a lot of, especially within the context of our culture and our nation. It is about freedom of speech and freedom of religion, freedom of this and freedom of that. So it might just be regarded as hate speech to some, and
Well,
yet it's not hate speech. Do you
yeah, and I
understand?
think the new bill, Theo, we've the president just signed the bill, the hate speech bill, was it just on a week ago now? And there's such a lot of dubious understanding surrounding it, but it could pose a very distinct threat to Christians in this country. It could, if it's going to be rolled out in a particular way, it could put us under threat.
Is there
Easily.
any, Theo, is there any sort of restrictions when it comes to social media concerning that hot topic in particular?
In Sweden?
Radio, for example? No, yeah. Or I don't know how it's like, what it's like in the rest of the world. I know it's like here.
I don't understand the question.
Are there any restrictions? Are there any restrictions? I know if you're going to address something like this on Facebook, for example, right? We're going to put it
Yeah.
out there on Facebook. Facebook has police, and they monitor what you broadcast, and they just decide they're going to remove it.
Yeah, they don't. They have, of course, their policies, but they also have their, as you say, their watchdogs, and they have their users that would maybe lodge a complaint and say,
But
I-
YouTube doesn't have that, obviously.
no, YouTube does have its built-in sort of buffer, but
Yeah.
that has that will
Like your copyrighted stuff.
yeah, they would scan
get
things,
through.
but that's more neutral. That applies to anything, and that's not an algorithm that checks for hate speech. But for instance, although it has, there's recent new introductions about artificial intelligence, for instance, where you have to, before you publish, you have to say yes or no to the question, does this content represent something that's not real but can be perceived as real? And I said, well,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it cuts to the chase in a sense. It's asked so broadly, but it cuts to the chase right away.
Right.
Because how
So-
do you define the ineffable
yeah,
and the spectacular and supernatural comes right in there.
yeah.
And that's the realm we function in.
Mm.
And it's interesting. I wanted actually. I was thinking Owen was going to go with the internet radio situation. What are there any restrictions there that you know of?
Yeah, no, not that as I mentioned earlier, we broadcast as an end user of a given platform. Radio.co provides a service to us, just like Facebook provides a service. So we are the end user of that service. If there's no legal basis upon which to stop internet radio, as there is no legal basis to stop Facebook. You can shut it down completely in that so-called sort of autocratic societies, right? You can do that, and that's happened, but you cannot in largely Western societies. That's really that's problematic. You are bordering on then infringing on people's free speech. The only reason why you would want to broadcast on via satellite or any other broadcasting services is to really make it accessible to more, because not everyone's got internet. That's for sure, and not everyone, and it's quite costly. Radio is still very, very cheap. Radio, as we used to know it, is dirt cheap. You don't need data. It doesn't cost you anything. Internet radio cost. Every single thing with internet radio is a cost. it's the urban and suburban listener is more likely to listen to us than folks from Harlem or another rural city
Right.
in South Africa. Because you listen for if it's an hour show, it's chunks out of your data. And that's a real dilemma for a lot of people. We understand that. But as long as and Terry and myself met this guy, the guy that allows the two of the reason why you're able to speak in South Africa at the moment, to me, is the consequence of a guy who took Telkom and the South African government to court, Nappy Maepa. And he basically stood in the way of a move to make the internet government owned. And we know where SAA went. We know where Eskom's been struggling. So all of these state-owned enterprises, the internet would have been a state-owned enterprise if it wasn't for this guy. But the point is that it's the biggest challenge to freedom of expression and freedom of speech. The internet is, and there will be a lot of economic reasons for all of these service providers to fight for you, because if Radio Co will go out of business, Facebook will go out of business in a given location if that's all shut down. Advertisers will. It's
massive, yeah.
It's huge. So,
so while it's there, we use it.
we use it, yeah, and we can go to Tronk for this as well. Why not? My goodness. I will visit you guys. I promise you.
We'll visit you. What?
We'll write you from there.
We'll write you from here. We'll write you from there.
I will bring Roger with me. And that will end the whole
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
So,
Theo, voor jy loop, Owen is nou, jy gaan nie vir Owen af van die lig afsny nie.